What's up, family? Thank you for tuning in to the DreamNation podcast. My name is Casanova. I'll be your host, and I'm excited to be bringing to you entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and trailblazers from around the world. Stay locked in with us because we're about to go on a journey that will change your life. What's up, DreamNation? Casanova back again, and today I'm very excited because we have someone on the line that is going to teach us how to not only go through the times of tragedy and adversity, but at the same time, how do you bounce back from it? And where does your mindset need to be for you to continuously become the best version of yourself? And so I'm very excited here. We just had an opportunity to connect a little bit, but I wanted to save everything for you all that's listening. So without further ado, go ahead and help me welcome Peter Sage to the stage. Peter, and that rhymed a little bit. I like that, right? I'm sure somebody else has said it before. But Peter, you want to go ahead and say what's up to DreamNation for me?
Guys, from what I understand and the energy you put out and the message you carry, this is an amazing podcast. I'm so excited. I don't take other people's time lightly. There's 1,000 things vying for our time every second of the day these days. So if somebody's gracious enough to be able to give someone like yourself and myself their time, I'm keen to give them an ROI for that in practical terms. This is not entertainment. You go watch YouTube, right? This is about how do I invest time in being able to become the best version of myself by having practical tools, insights, and inspirational strategies to go execute on that make a difference. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah, so that's what I'm here to do. Let's make it work.
Let's make it work. Now, I always love to give the proper introduction, and I'm sure yours is going to be as great as we've ever heard before. But I always like to think of entrepreneurs in today's world as superheroes. Why? Is because we're constantly putting on different capes and we're flying around trying to solve different problems for different people. And so I like to say, before being a world international renowned speaker, before working with guys like Tony Robbins, before being really a coach and mentor to thousands, I'm sure, of other entrepreneurs. Let's take it back to when you were just a young boy. Tell me, who is Peter Sage?
Well, depending on how old you're talking about here, if it was kind of in my, leaving school era, I like yourself, I'm not a college grad. I dropped out of school at 16. I've got a PhD in results. And from my academic background, I'm not a smart guy. I try to keep things simple. But if you'd have spoken to that guy, he'd probably been too arrogant and egocentric to pick up the phone to take the call. But if you go a little bit younger, because I'm a great believer that who we are is shaped in our childhood years, very formative years. I had two really great parents. They're both gone now. I don't have any current family. I don't have brothers or sisters or aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. It's me and my two Jack Russells right now. And I'm living on the island of Tenerife in the Canaries, which I'm a sunshine guy. And but back as a young kid, I had a pretty okay childhood. There's no major traumas or significant emotional events, but I always had a predisposition for wanting to be one of those people that they called entrepreneurs. It was like this mystical kind of, as you said, superhero. And I remember my mum turning around telling me a story that I can't even remember. And she said, when you were 6 years old, she was outside the school gates to collect me from the kind of what we call junior school, sort of post-kindergarten. And the old headmistress that was kind of an old battle axe and had also been the teacher to some of the parents that were now standing outside the door, waiting for their kids. And she was called Miss Yem, and kind of a fearsome kind of old school disciplinarian. You can imagine, right?
Yeah.
Battle axe kind of, yeah. And she comes out and says, "Mrs. Sage, come here." And all the other parents kind of cowered away, apparently. And my mom says, "Yes, Miss Yem." Says, "Mrs. Sage, I think your son is going to be a businessman." And she's like, "Oh, what makes you say that, Miss Yem?" Says, "Well, today in art class, everybody drew sweets and cut them out and sort of colored them in. And your son went round and sold all of his and took everybody's lunch money." And I hear story after story of that, of growing up. So I think there was always a situation in me that realized that, school, certainly in my day, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been unemployable for 30 years this year.
Right.
And in my day, there was very little support for entrepreneurship. It was still the very post-industrial revolution model of show up, sit down, do as you're told, don't get creative, and hopefully get out and get a piece of paper signed by somebody you've never met to validate your intelligence to get a job that's going to last 3 years before you change it. That's kind of the model. But there was part of me that realized that school, traditional education, essentially does two things. It teaches you how to pass tests and work for somebody else.
Mm.
And it's always left for the entrepreneurs to find their own spark, their own inner sense of desire. And as the late, great Jim Rohn said, formal education may help you make a living. And that's so questionable these days. But self-education can help you make a fortune.
Oh, yeah.
And I took that to heart. And for me growing up, that was it. It was openness to possibility. I would never want to settle for less than what I knew I was worth. Why would I let somebody else put a price on me when they weren't me and it wasn't in their interests? And what was a very interesting revelation, especially for a young kid, probably about 12, 13, where you're kind of facing the options of what you want to do, kind of 16s, a couple of years out, going to college, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Parents are drilling you down to go to university so they can have their certainty that children will be ultimately happy instead of completely miserable and in debt. But which paradoxically is what most people who graduate college end up being.
Right.
But I thought, hang on a minute. If I get a job, and let's even say it's $500 a week, which back then is big money, right? Some people would take that today. Let's say $500 a week. Surely the job has to be worth more than $500 a week. Otherwise, there'd be nothing in it for the business owner.
Right.
So by the very definition of taking a job, I'm accepting less than what I'm worth. And I didn't sit with that.
Wow. I love that. First off, I want to know, where do you think, so what did your parents do when you're young? What did your parents do?
So my father owned a junkyard. He kind of owned his own job. He had 2 employees, and for 40 years, it's where cars go at the end of their life and they get crushed and sell off spares and that kind of stuff. And it's a great playground for a young kid. Not great on health and safety, but it was a good playground. My mother was kind of a social worker. And so she worked with different minorities and ethnic minorities. And it was interesting. She was a special minister for the Catholic Church, and my father was an atheist. So it was an interesting dichotomy to grow up in, but in hindsight taught me a very valuable lesson about having tolerance for other people's point of view. Because my mum never imposed her religious stuff on my dad. She knew wouldn't get anywhere. And my dad was very accepting of all of what he used to call the God Squad. All of my mum's friends that would come around and do their church stuff in the living room, and he'd just go to the bar. But he was okay. There was no judgment. And that was a great, phenomenal lesson, I think, for a young kid, vicariously learning at that level, growing up. And taught me to see that, no matter how thin you slice it, there's always two sides. And to be able to hold a space rather than judge. Because to quote Mother Teresa, the second you judge somebody, you lose all ability to learn from them or influence them. Wow.
I love that. And just because I was thinking, so for me, again, I've always said that exposure, right, is the key to success. So you have to be able to see so many different things. And I think that was what I lacked growing up. I didn't have exposure to a lot of things. So where my exposure came from was TV. Really, right? I remember growing up, my favorite show was VH1's The Fabulous Life Up. Because I was growing up and it was like basically VH1's version of MTV Cribs. And so for me, since nobody in my family ever owned anything and nobody owned a business or house car, nothing, I was always looking to see how could I own those types of things. But when I ask you, because that was going to be my next question, is like, where do you think that the mentality came from for you to be an early entrepreneur? But if your dad was already out there owning a business, that allowed you to, in my opinion, from what I'm thinking, I'm hearing you say, is it allowed you to be able to think more creatively and strategically about how you could solve problems for other people. But at the same time, because of your mom being a social worker and never having that mindset of judging other people, that also allowed you to be able to build relationships with those people, to let them know that you weren't the bad guy. And then so it kind of was the best of both worlds for you. Is that right?
So I would say there's definitely some threads in there. Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't call myself creative or strategic in my early days. I think I was very much part of the slow learning.
You got to be pretty creative to be able to sell other people your cutouts and get money out of it. That's what I'm talking about. Like, no one's thinking that way.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things I was in the Slow Learners Club with. But yeah, when it came to mindset, I had a significant event happened when I was 17 years old, and it's the classic example, as I'm sure the same with you, Casanova, that when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And I was 17 years old. I was working for my dad for a short while because that was kind of the easy way out, and I was earning $40 a week. That was my wages.
Okay.
And I had to pay my mum £10 a week for board, and I was left with $30 at the end of the week, and not a huge amount of stuff at a young 17-year-old that wants his own car. And although the rule was I could drive anything in the junkyard nobody else wanted to buy. It wasn't a good incentive to put on your vision board.
Right.
So I remember turning around to my dad one time, says, "Dad, I'm leaving at the end of the week." I says, "Well, what are you getting into, son?" I says, "Well, I don't actually know, but I have a belief that says if you jump in the deep end, you can only swim." And I decided to go and essentially look for opportunities at that point. And two things happened. One is I decided to go and start a toy business on flea markets. And I had an old Mini. This is before the days when Minis were cool, right? The old Italian Job kind of deal.
Yeah.
And
like
I had a little Mini.
You're saying.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
But without the Cooper part. In the old, I'm 6'3". I don't fit in a Mini.
Got it.
And so I'm driving my little car. I drive to a wholesaler. Two of the gears didn't work. Third and fourth. Well, no, it was second and fourth didn't work. I had to go from first gear to third gear, and that was all I could do. Because it's manual stick shift, in England, right?
Yeah.
So I drove to a wholesaler. I blagged my way in. Literally, I was walking up and down the aisles taking notes, and the manager comes over and says, "Excuse me, do you have a trade account?" And I'm like, "No, not yet." He's like, "Well, can I help you?" I said, "Well, I'm a market trader. I specialize in toys, and I have stalls at all of these high level places." And I was telling the truth in advance. and anyway, I got a account card. I bought got my last $40 from my dad. I'd given $10 to my mum. I'd given my friend $10 I owed him, and I had my last £20 to my name. And I bought 15 pounds worth of toys in that wholesaler's. And on the Sunday, I drove to the flea market, which is basically a big field where cars pull up and you sell out of your trunk. And I handed my last £5 as the entrance fee as a sort of store holder, wondering if I'd ever see it again. See it going through the window right now. And I didn't have a little table that people were putting on because, one, it wouldn't fit in the Mini, and two, I couldn't afford it. But my mum had given me a blanket, and I put the blanket on the floor, and I put my $15 for the toys on the blanket, and I sold everything for $30. I doubled up.
Wow.
And I went back the day before, the week after. I went and bought $25 for the toys, $5 to get on the car boot sale. My mum gave me credit because she on the board because she see I was trying to do something. And I sold a lot for $50. And I built up and up over several weeks until I got enough to cover a real market stall. And then I started doing markets and toy parties and Sunday markets. And that was my first business. It was Pete's Toys. I was 17 years old. And my catchphrase was Pete the Toy Boy. 17. Wouldn't work these days.
Right.
But,
no, I definitely don't think that would these days.
Yeah. Probably open a bakery. I'd be Pete the Sugar Daddy. I don't know. But no, the significant thing that happened was that at the same time that I left my dad, I was also playing pool for a living. On a Friday night, I'd go to my local bar and I'd shoot pool to supplement my income. So that was pretty good because I got a lot more else to do. And I was waiting for my turn at the pool table, and there was a guy at the bar, Jamaican guy. Actually, his name was Del. And he pulled out a mobile phone. Now, this would have been 1989. Now, mobile phones back then were like $1,000 and nobody had one.
Right.
And this is the days where they just transitioned from the house brick with a carrying handle, the transportables, to this like thing that could fit in your pocket.
Right.
And it was like, wow, this guy must have money. And I thought, I'm leaving my dad this week looking for opportunity. I'll go talk to him. And I struck up a conversation, and it changed my life. He essentially says, he was one of these people, these entrepreneurs, right? And he was much older as well. He was like 23. And he was like, "I see something in you, young man." Yeah, I was 17. And we had this conversation, and he says, "I'm going to bring you something tomorrow. I'm going to leave it behind the bar, and I hand it to the landlord. Come and get it." And I drove in the next day, and the landlord, John, the publican, turned around, the bar owner, said, "Oh, somebody's dropped something in for you." And he gave me a plastic bag with a 6-tape cassette program in from like Nightingale Conant, one of the old motivational seminar kind of deals. Now, to this day, I don't know which one it was. I've often thought I'd love to know. But I sat with that on my bed. I had a little single bed at my parents' house with one of those little pop-up old cassette players and the little foamy phones. And this was like, whoa, this hit me so hard. I'm like, wow. They're teaching you how to be successful. You mean there's an industry that
Right.
teaches success? I mean, where the hell was that at school? Because that's what I wanted to learn. Not freaking algebra, right? Not the periodic table. Teach me how to be successful. And I threw myself into personal growth. Every spare bit of money I made, I bought a new cassette, a new book, a new something. And while all my friends that were at school or college were, in the bar on a Friday, saying the same jokes to the same people, drinking the same stuff, talking the same crap, I would be at home absorbing like a sponge. Yeah, anything I could do that would put me in what I thought at that time we called the 5%. 5% of people, if you look at them throughout history, have ever reached retirement age in any kind of shape financially, let alone emotionally, spiritually, or otherwise. Right? And it's 5% of people in the world that own the world. So how could I get into that 5%? Here was a kid, and I was so driven, so motivated, and so personal growth. This year, 30 years. I'm 47 right now. So 30 years in personal growth and business growth. And that's really what's given me, I would say, like Jim Rohn said, the edge. I made my first million in my early 20s. I bought my first Ferrari Testarossa for cash when I was 25. I was flying Concorde. And most of that, in all honesty, looking back, was trying to cover up the insecurities as a young man to try to prove to the world I was good enough.
Wow.
So there was no real satisfaction there. It was always, you've got to catch the next rabbit. Then you get that, there's another white tail appears, and then you catch it. And you can never catch the rabbit of fulfillment by running on the track of achievement. Wow. And that was a big lesson for me to learn luckily I was about 27, 28 when that finally hit home, after I'd nearly killed myself driving home at 2 a.m. from the office and realized that, I was building a monster that was trapping me.
So talk to me about what was the first business though that allowed you to really scale and make your first million? Because a lot of people hearing this right now and they're like, wow, okay. Well, first off, Nightingale, which is still huge. And I know that they have published a lot of Jim Rohn stuff. And you mentioned Jim Rohn. I'm a huge, huge avid fan of Jim Rohn. And I had the same mindset that you did. The first time I ever was exposed to him, it was a YouTube video. But what he was teaching was so profound, right? And I just felt like no one had ever taught this before. And obviously there was other guys like Tony Robbins and even Robert Kiyosaki. But Jim Rohn, in my opinion, is definitely one of the granddaddies. So talk to me about, in that time, like, were you doing network marketing, or what was the business that allowed you to scale up?
I did some network marketing for, I think, NSA to start with. And that was like a really good lesson for me. It didn't make any money, but it taught me how to relate to people. And I was doing some of the business opportunity briefing at the front of the room. So it got me into speaking, which, 30 years later is probably what I'm best known for. But my first major business was actually a casting agency. I set up a casting agency. I was the first person in the world to pioneer database casting. Now, this was in 1995.
What do you mean by pioneer database casting?
I will explain. So in 1995, there was something that changed the world forever. A certain guy who's getting a bit of flack right now, a certain Mr. Bill Gates, came up with an operating system called Windows 95. And it changed the world because it was the first time in human history that you could actually store, retrieve, and more importantly, share data en masse without having or needing a degree in like geekiness. Prior to that, it was all disk operating system. DOS 6.2 is what I started with. It was like, which I couldn't understand. So Windows 95 was the first plug and play, click, semi-intuitive interface that allowed people who didn't understand code to use a computer.
Okay. And
so I was, prior to that, the casting industry was ran in the UK, I'm talking about now, but was ran by along a kind of a filing cabinet procedure. And there was a book called Spotlight that if you wanted to be an aspiring actor or film extra or whatever, you had your pictures took and your portfolio put in this book, and every casting director in the business had this book, and each year it would be published and you'd flick through and look at the mugshots and choose people, etc. Now, that's pretty okay pre-95, but when computers came out and became mainstream and the PC and database stuff happened, I put on a database of film extras and I had a company called Lorraine Dior. And I chose Lorraine because it was voted the most sexiest name in Britain that year. And Dior was in Christian Dior for the association.
Yeah.
and created the company Lorraine Dior. And basically, we did some really great stuff. I charged people £20 at that time to have a portfolio to go on on our database, and they'd get their full photographs scanned. I mean, you pay $100 for that at the time in a professional studio, and they would pay $5 a month to stay active on a searchable database. And we would then promote to casting directors that, let's say, you had somebody not show up and you needed somebody quickly. You make one phone call to us, you need a 6-foot dwarf, clean shaven with a beard, whatever, whatever combination.
Right.
And 8 clicks of the mouse later, we can tell you who we've got, where they're at. And in those days, not everyone had email. We could fax, but we could email or fax you the stuff. So we became known in the industry as the go-to for quick choices. And we cast for a lot of good stuff. Soldier was a big thing there. Bruce Willis, The Fifth Element. Remember that?
Yeah.
We did some casting for that back in the day. TV commercials, that kind of stuff. And we weren't taking you'd call them union registered actors. We were taking anybody, because in that industry, it's vanity. Yeah, you'd pay $5 a month for the chance to walk on in Seinfeld so that you could show all your friends you had a walk on part in Seinfeld, or Friends or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah, and for that $5 a month, we would give you $20 a month in value. You got a free subscription to Flix magazine. You got discounts off at Burger King and other stuff we were able to negotiate. And I put 20,000 extras on the database, paying me $5 a month. I was making $100,000 a month at 22 years old, and I couldn't stop it. That was 1 out of 5 businesses that I built at the time.
Wow. So whatever happened, did you sell it off, or did it?
Yes, I learned a big lesson. Again, I've never had a lesson in business. I'm one of those kind of mavericks, ready, fire, aim kind of deal. And so I ended up selling that business after 3 years, and the person I sold it to, kind of based on an earnout, ran up all the credit lines and basically ran away. So the business finally went down. I learned a big lesson. I was left with a lease around an office and no more, and bounced back. And within 6 months, set up a nutrition company that became probably the most successful company of its kind in Europe, pioneering a product from the US at the time, which you still can't buy in England, called DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, which is an anti-aging supplement that you can buy in Walmart, gas stations. But in England, the MCA, which is the equivalent of the FDA, won't license it in because the pharmaceutical companies don't want it because it's too effective, it's natural, and you can't patent it. Same story. So I found a way, working with the Home Office drugs branch with the government, that I could legally bring it in for people to have without needing a license. I found a loophole. It was a gray area. And I basically put 10,000 people on that product over a period of 2 years at $20 a month. So now I'm back to $200,000 a month. And it's again, and the way I did that was from nothing. I mean, I had no money.
Did you ever have partners with these? Like
I've done a lot on business partners and not business partners, and how to choose and not. So I've pulled people in, which I wish I hadn't. Yeah, the easiest, fastest advice I can give you on business partners: alignment of vision is the first thing, because you both want to know where you're heading. Alignment of values, because even if you both have the same vision, you may have very different ideas of what integrity means to get there, or levels of risk tolerance or what have you. And then the final thing I've learned over the years is have no gray areas. Have the ability to sit down and put anything on the table, and if you have to agree to disagree, that's cool. But if it festers, if something starts brewing, because everybody sees life through their own model of the world, through their own lens. And if I think I'm doing more work than you and you're getting more reward than me, the human nature is to start to build resentment, and then you'll have confirmation bias that you'll project onto them to validate your own sense of being right. And that's only got one result, and you're going to have a bust up.
I love that. Man, that's so crazy, because I think in the world now, everybody wants to start these big companies, right? And what do I mean by that? They want to think that their company is $1 million company, right? They want to think that they are really building something, but a lot of the times they don't have a lot of the capital. So instantly it's like, okay, well, maybe I need to go, 1, get some capital, and 2, I need a couple partners. But then people struggle, and I've even just had a very good friend of mine who struggled with having a partnership, and then within 2 months, he was already out of the partnership because of, just like you said, he felt like he was doing a lot more of the work, and his partner wasn't supplementing on the other side, either bringing in the business or having the same type of work ethic. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Talk to me about, how did you get to the point to where you were working with guys like Tony Robbins and world-renowned leaders in that realm? Because you've been had 4 or 5 companies. How do you then get into speaking, and why did you decide that was the area that you wanted to take it to?
I got into speaking and coaching for one reason, and that is I got tired of giving free advice.
Mm.
And I was always, as an identity, I was an entrepreneur first, and I was a speaker / coach mentor second. Now, in the last few years, I've had a switch around on that. I've positioned myself far more as a speaker, coach, mentor first, and turned that into my business. Whereas previously, most of my businesses have been traditional, and I've had 27 companies now, some of which have failed majestically and wiped me out, some of which have been global multi-million-dollar success stories, and pretty much everything in between. So yeah, in the trenches of entrepreneurship and business, I can hold my own in any level of conversation. And when it comes to coaching, again, I was experienced trainer with Tony for 15 years. I'm required to go in and work with everybody from drug addicts, homeless, abuse cases, trauma, suicide, right up to $100 million CEOs, who, by the way, are usually drug addicts and suicidal. But ironically. But being able to turn that around quickly, because human behavior is a game very few people understand. Self-sabotage, procrastination, glass ceilings, all of that stuff that the average person hits and doesn't understand why, and then beats themselves up and goes into a guilt loop and runs the same variation of a strategy that didn't work before to try to get through it again. You get my point?
Yeah.
So and again, being in personal growth, I did Tony's seminars back in the 90s. I was invited to join his leadership team. I spent 3 years, and then in 2002, very privileged to become his youngest serving trainer. And then, as I say, spent 15 years going around the world with Tony. Basically, what you see Tony do on stage, the trainers should be able to do on the floor. Obviously not as elegantly as Tony, because he spent 40 years mastering it in the game. But we still have to have a high standard of effectiveness. If somebody comes up to me and they've been stuttering for 20 years, and they've been spending an hour on the couch every week with some therapist doing some 50-year-old modality that is great for making Mercedes payments for therapists, but doesn't really get the guy off the couch permanently. You put them with me for 1 hour, and that stutter's gone. Or I lose my title as trainer. So it's not that we're special, clever. I've already dispelled that myth. I'm an average guy when it comes to IQ. But the strategies that you use make a massive difference. And most people are conditioned to using strategies that don't work, or are ineffective, or give limited results.
Okay. Talk to me about as you look back at your time with Tony and with the team, do you have one particular story that always comes to your mind, and how it changed your life?
I don't know, change about this. I mean, there's so many. In fact, some of the stories that I was involved in are now deeply entrenched in what we call trainer folklore. But I'll share one.
Yeah.
That we were at an event and this was before I was a trainer. This was a year before I was trainer. So probably 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. So 20 years ago. And we're in Australia at a Date with Destiny, which is the same seminar that you saw on the I'm Not Your Guru documentary he did.
Yeah.
And I've done, I've facilitated over a dozen Date with Destinies. So I'm looking to become a trainer. I'm part of what's known as the senior leadership. So that's kind of the step down before trainer. The trainers are promoted from the senior leadership team. And I see myself as a trainer anyway at this point. It's like, I'm experienced. I know what I'm doing. I can handle it. Somebody comes into the room, says, oh, there's a participant outside that's kicking off. She's like, throwing chairs and like she's having like some sort of psychotic episode. We need a trainer. Well, I'll handle it. And I go out and I see this woman in the corridor, like kind of like outside the main ballroom. So it's quite a wide kind of area. And there's people like giving her space around her. And she's screaming, that effing Tony, effing Robbins has ruined my effing life. And she's like screaming and kicking chairs. And of course, I'm thinking, okay, the first thing I need to do is break her pattern. And you can do that.
Break her pattern?
Yeah, change your state, break her state. Like, if you're in the middle of an argument and somebody outside of that argument asks you some random question and you're like, what, sorry? And then you can't get back to the argument. You broke your pattern. So, but if you allow that pattern to accelerate, it'll intensify and it gets a lot harder. So try to kill the monster when it's as little as possible. Anyway, she's already in a frenzy, but I need to break her pattern fast. And yeah, you could do that anyways, just by walk up and say, oh, excuse me, what is your middle name? And anything. I mean, it could be, yeah. But in order to do that, you need to have rapport. Rapport is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way you build rapport with somebody who's in an angry state or a heightened emotional state is to match the intensity, but not the emotion. So if you're angry, if I try to build rapport by getting angry, we're going to clash. But if you're really angry, and I walk up and I say, Casanova, I just need to have a chat with you, and I match the intensity, but I'm not matching the emotion, that way I can start to build more rapport into your world without escalating it. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Makes 100% sense.
So I'm figuring out a strategy, how to walk up, build rapport, and my mind's going, trying to do all this. I walk up, I get about 4 or 5 yards from her, yeah, and I'm walking kind of through the dead space now that the crowd has created. She stops, she locks eyes on me, and she goes, oh my God, starts putting her hands around her throat and choking herself, and then goes, oh, it's him, pointing at me. It's the Dark Angel. He's back. Please don't let him take me to the mothership. At which point, she completely broke my pattern.
Right.
I'm like deer in the headlights. Like, well, did not see that coming. At that time, 2 trainers actually happened to be walking past. Right, and notice, and I watched them literally breeze into this situation, take control, elegantly take this woman to a completely different place, and transform her within 60 seconds. She's sitting down having a normal conversation, and they entered her world. I mean, they basically banished this Dark Lord into a pyramid of white light and sent his mothership off somewhere. I mean, it's, you enter their world, and they were doing all of this different NLP or different trainer techniques that we taught, and it was so elegant. It taught me a massive lesson that the number one, and this is for entrepreneurs especially, the number one skill that you can develop is the ability to handle uncertainty, especially in today's marketplace. The moment that you lose your certainty, you're done. And so to see the certainty that these 2 trainers had, right, and just glide in there and just roll with the punches and go with this thing in a way that they had total ability to handle whatever uncertainty came up from a place of owning them, being massively certain that they could, was a massive lesson for me. And I taught, because I lost my certainty, right?
Yep.
And I was useless at that point.
Okay.
And so that was a big lesson for me. And again, same in business. If for an entrepreneur, there is no certainty in business. Now, that's only a very short jump from the reality that most people are finding today, Casanova, which is there's no certainty in life.
Right.
A lot of people just had their certainty blanket pulled, with the Corona yank.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, understanding that the strongest trees don't grow in the best soil. They grow in the strongest winds. We don't live in a comfort-centric experience. And this is one of the first things that people need to understand on the journey of emotional maturity, that life is not a comfort-centric experience that we've been conditioned by media and mainstream commercialism and consumerism to basically think it is. You're earning money to have a more comfortable life. You're buying stuff to make things easier. That's the predominant mindset. And it's conditioned us into an illusion to think that life is a comfort-centric experience when it isn't. It's not meant to be. That's why everybody has problems and challenges. It's by design. And the moment that you go from understanding that life is not a comfort-centric experience, but in fact, it's a growth-centric experience, your life will change because you will see it from a completely different perspective and you will start to embrace the nature of the game. So if you're a tree, you want to pray for some strong winds and not bitch about them when they show up.
Right.
Because that's what makes you who you are. You went through massive adversity. And you wouldn't be sitting here today adding value to thousands of people had that not been the case, because you wouldn't be authentic about what you were saying.
Right. Right.
And most of us, when something shows up that threatens our comfort pictures, whether it's a traumatic divorce, whether it's losing a job, whether it's facing a lawsuit, whatever it may be, almost every single time, 6 months average, you can look back and think, wow, thank goodness that happened. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this now. Maybe longer, maybe shorter. My point being is this: if you know that's the case, why wait 6 months before you celebrate?
Right. Wow. I love that. And it's kind of like the Jim Rohn quote, and I don't want to butcher it, but he's like, don't wish that don't wish that the sails were, softer, wish that you were stronger.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
Calm
yeah,
seas don't make a great sailor.
right. I love that. Now, for somebody that's out there that's listening right now and they're saying, yes, I love everything the way you're talking about, but what would be the first step in fixing my mindset to be able to stay, as I like to call it, triple C, right? And I stay cool, calm, and collected in any situation, right? I always think of the greats like Tom Brady, right? He gets to that fourth quarter, no matter what they're down, right? Tom Brady's always, guys, we got this, right? And that's why he's proven to be a champion. He doesn't get rattled. He stays triple C. What would you say is the first step in someone? Is it reading a certain book? Is it, meditation? Because there's a lot of people, just like you said, that are in fear right now because they don't know what their situation will look like in the next 6 months. What's that first step for them?
I would say there's two. And again, life isn't an instrument, life's an orchestra. Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects. There's no one magic pill for anything. And chasing the illusion of thinking there is will allow you to chase your tail for a long time. So if I was to try to put it in as shorter number of concepts or steps as I can, I'll probably bring it down to two. One is the fact that, commit to a level of emotional maturity, because we're not taught this in school. And there are a lot of emotional teenagers right now running around in very adult bodies because they don't know how to think properly. And so I already mentioned one of the great steps on the road to emotional maturity. There's two I'll share. So one is the fact that the day you recognize that life is not a comfort-centric experience, but it's a growth-centric experience. That's the day you realize you're an athlete in the gym. So if you didn't know you're an athlete and you're in the gym, you got this personal trainer making you do push-ups till you puke and run on a treadmill until you eyes bleed, you're going to try everything to avoid it. You're going to do just enough to tick the box for the set. You're going to hide behind the weight stack when you see him coming. But if you know you're an athlete and you're here to win the gold, if you're not throwing up in 30 minutes, you want your money back.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very different relationship to challenge, because now instead of seeing it from the perspective of the muscle fiber on that last burning rep where you're screaming at the brain, stop, send pain signals, what's happening? We're being destroyed, we're being broken down, help. You're seeing it from the mindset of the athlete where you're proud that you can't lift your arms for another 2 hours.
Right.
So growth-centric instead of comfort-centric are two very different lives.
Right.
The next step on the journey of emotional maturity begins the moment where you finally become okay not being liked.
Mm.
And in today's world where so many people are running around trying to replug in their umbilical cord into some social media channel so they can get love, recognition, validation, approval, and all the usual suspects, and they're driven by what I call goop, the good opinion of other people. Most people spend their life swimming in goop, and it is disempowering, sticky, nasty, smelly substance that will take you down a path of no potential. So if you can become okay not being liked because you realize that, hey, listen, that person doesn't like you. Most people are struggling to like themselves. Don't make it about you. Everybody's only projecting from their own model of the world. Hence, two men sat behind prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. You see, your condition never defines you. It always just gives you the opportunity for you to define yourself. And so those two steps on the ladder of emotional maturity are huge for people.
Can we say that again? Your condition.
Your condition, circumstances in the outer world never define you. They only give you the opportunity for you to define yourself.
Wow, I love that. I wanted you to say it again because I need someone to hear that. That is so powerful in itself. But keep going, for sure.
So that'd be the first part, is commit to emotional maturity. And those are two great steps to take that'll transform virtually anybody that makes the choice to own those decisions. The second part, in terms of fear right now and uncertainty, ask better questions. Questions are the steering wheel of the mind. If you don't know how to ask good questions, you're screwed, because somebody else is going to put their hands on your wheel that do not have the agenda of taking you to a place that supports your best interests. Mainstream media right now, classic example. If you're watching mainstream media, I can guarantee that everything, up to 90% of everything you're looking at right now, is distorted misinformation to promote one agenda: eyes on. That's it. That's the only thing they care about. They're not a charity. They're a business. They're in a cutthroat competitive business, and they win that business by having eyes on. Otherwise, they get fired or they go bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's it. And everything is filtered through that first, and then potentially what do we think is best for the public second. But yeah, mainstream media. You want to cure a virus, you can do it with a red button on your remote.
Mm.
That's one of the things. Don't get me. You go to my YouTube channel. I put videos out 10 years ago on what the business model of the media is and why it's designed to stimulate a part of the brain called the amygdala, and they know how to do it. Go check it out.
Definitely.
But when it comes to asking better questions, right now the difference between why is that happening to me versus okay, what's great about this I've not noticed yet, or how can I turn this to my advantage, or the most powerful question a person can answer in their lifetime, according to Albert Einstein, is do I live in a friendly or a hostile universe? Because if you answer that question, I live in a hostile universe, everything that you make a decision through from your primary model of the world is going to be fear-based, because everything out there with teeth can kill you and is out to get you and you're separate from you. Whereas if you live in a friendly universe, so I'm an inverse paranoid. I believe the whole universe is involved in a hidden secret conspiracy to make me happy and successful. And if I live in a friendly universe, I can trust the bends in the river of life. Because if you've noticed, there's no straight lines in nature. The left brain likes straight lines. Oh, here's my goal. Here's the fastest way to get there. No, it isn't. The fastest way from A to B is never a straight line. If you think it is, try driving to work in a straight line. See how far it gets you before you hit you through your neighbor's wall or you cross the wrong intersection. No, you've got to head south, turn left onto the cloverleaf to go north. That's the fastest, most effective way. But there's no straight lines there. You see a straight line in nature is man-made, right? Nature by its very definition is non-linear. There's a reason why the primary pattern of life is the wave. Microwave, sound wave, light wave, radio wave. Right? They're not straight lines, they're waves. Right? So it's a non-linear reality. So if we understand that the river of life is always going to bend and twist, if you live in a friendly universe, you can trust the bends. You can go with the flow, because the alternative is to start swimming upstream, bitch about the current, or try to dig a channel through the bank in a straight line towards your goal. And that's exhausting. So asking better questions is a real key to being able to shift stuff right now, and holding an empowering model of the world. Right? You either believe in this or you don't. There's no like, oh, I'll believe that life's friendly when the sun's out and I can kick back with the margarita on the boat. But oh, hang on a minute, storm's coming. Not sure. No, you can't dabble at this. You commit or you don't, or suffer the consequences of having a dabbling-based mindset, which nothing in history was ever achieved of note by a dabbler or a critic, by the way. So you get the idea. So ask better questions, commit to emotional maturity, and embrace the ride. I mean, I'm saying to people right now that I've got a lot of complaints. People are in lockdown. Yeah, we've been in lockdown for nearly 2 months here on the island. It's Spanish territory. The army was on the streets on day one. People are being fined if they get out of there. I mean, it's draconian BS. Absolute. And don't get me started. If you want to go see my take on the Corona deal, then I just did an interview recently on American Real, which I debunk virtually everything that's going on right now in its proper order, or give you more empowering questions to ask. But it's all coming out now. For the next 2-3 weeks, the science and the data you can't suppress it. There's too many smart people that are figuring this out. But that aside, if you come from a place of being able to empower yourself now, because I'll pre-frame this with one thing. My mother turned around to me one time and said something very profound. She said, I was 12 years old. She's that age where you know that you know more than your parents. And she wanted me to go to bed, and I wanted to watch a film. My friends at school were going to watch the film and everything else, but I had homework and getting up early. And anyway, I remember turning around something like that. I can't wait till I'm 18 and you can't tell me what to do. Right? One of those emotionally mature kind of conversations. And she said something. She says, "Son, don't ever wish away your childhood, because you only get one of them." And that made me think. I'm like, wow, something? Yeah, I don't have to worry about all this stuff my parents worry about, like taxes and mortgage payments. And I don't see any adults out there on their BMX. Like I can go out and enjoy it, and I have to worry about all that stuff. Stuff just happens. Food appears on the table. This is great. It's like, so I say to people right now, we're in an unprecedented time in history. We may only get one lockdown. Don't wish it away, because I can promise you, when life goes back to where it is, you're going to have a time where you think, wow, I wish I could just sit down and pick up a book. I wish I could just spend a bit more time with the family without having a deadline of jumping in the car and having to be somewhere and have to run around and all this kind of stuff. And there's so many ways. You ask better questions. If I knew that I only had 1 week to live right now, how would I spend it in my lockdown? You don't see people on their deathbed turn around and say, please go fetch me my mahogany framed MBA certificate. And you don't see people say, please go fetch me my stock options, of when I got my first million so I can look at it one last time. No. If people turn around and say, please go fetch me the people I care about the most so I can tell them how I feel one last time. And we've got an unprecedented level of opportunity here to connect as a family, as a team, as a community that we've never had in human history. Don't wish it away too soon. It's going to end at some point soon, but don't wish it away too soon. Whatever you give energy to expands. Whatever you bring neutrality to, you neutralize. So, choose wisely.
I love it, man. That's so fire. Let me ask, has there been any book that has been so profound on your mindset shift? Or is there any, podcast or something that you always go to that put you back into your state of knowing that it's all going to be okay and not having that fear mindset?
It depends where you're at. And I get asked a lot, what's your favorite book recommendation, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you need to understand that people can only ever receive from the level they're at. Yeah. And
So for someone right now who is in a fear mindset, for somebody right now who maybe understands that this time is the only time that they might ever get, and their time is dwindling away to maybe go out on their own dreams, their own, their own adventure, right? And right now they're looking to change their whole world and look back on it 5 years from now and say, man, because of that one piece of information, for you it was Nightingale. What would you recommend for someone else who's in that state of the 17-year-old boy who's naive and wouldn't pick up the phone to listen?
The one thing that I would recommend, and I really don't want to sound self-promoting here, but the book that I wrote 2 years ago, it should never have been a book. It's never designed to be a book. It's private letters. It's called The Inside Track, an inspirational guide to conquering adversity. And every single person that's read that has been emailing me through this crisis saying, wow, that has made the difference to where I'm at right now. And if I give you a little bit of background to it, because again, I'm a great believer that theory doesn't cover the price of admission to the higher levels of greatness. You can't learn to swim on dry land, to quote Bruce Lee. So if you have put yourself in this position. I was in Dubai. I was living in Dubai for 6 years. I'm a sunshine guy. And I was doing some business with HP, Hewlett Packard, a big multinational company, who again, shall remain nameless, as HP. And I bought $12.5 million of the goods on a couple of deals. I paid for it in full. I sold it at a tiny percent margin in IT, and you're talking 1-2%. 7 years later, I'm in England. They knock on my door 7 a.m. with a team of ruthless lawyers from London, $100 million firm, freezing all of my worldwide assets and suing me for $17 million. I'm like, what? Like, we didn't say that you could resell those goods. I'm like, you didn't give me a contract saying I couldn't. I'm not an authorized distributor. I'm an independent guy. And the only stipulation was I had to pay in full, which I did. So, oh, well, if we knew you were going to resell it, we'd have charged you more for it. I'm like, it's your issue. I said, where do you get 17 million as a loss from? How much money did you make on the 12.5 million I gave you? Oh, no, that's irrelevant. 17 million is the difference in the wholesale price you bought it at and the retail price in Walmart. I'm like, you're on drugs. Right? I said, no one's going to even entertain that for a second. Right? And here's all the reasons why. I mean, it's just fantasy. But they said, well, we kind of don't want to go to court. Give us $100,000, we'll make it all go away. I'm like, oh, I get it. You just want some of the profit I made on the deal, and you're trying to throw some financial handcuffs and bully me. I'm like, you know something? No, not playing ball. 6 months later, they throw a contempt of court application at me out of the blue saying that I breached the freezing order. I'm like, I haven't breached the freezing order. And I looked at their argument. It was clever. It was intelligent. It was well constructed, as you'd imagine, decent law firm to do. But I thought any judge looking at this is going to laugh it out of court in 5 minutes. At the time, I've got 50 staff in my company. I'm doing 6 figures a month in revenue. And I show up to court and I learn a lot about how the court system works. They sell it to the judge. He gives me 6 months in prison as the only non-criminal. This is a civil matter. Never been arrested, never been accused of a crime. Yeah, still don't have a criminal record. And I ended up doing 6 months in the most violent prison in England, and in Pentonville. And when it looked like it was going south, my fiance at the time turned around and said, "Why is this happening?" And I'm like, "Honey, actually, I really don't know. But here's what I do know. Over the last 25 years, I've helped millions of people around the world with the work that I do. But maybe the people I could really help never get to see it because they're in somewhere like prison. If the universe, or whatever you want to call it, wants to send me in to go help people, let me go." And I never went in with the identity of a prisoner, not for a second. I went in with the identity of a secret agent of change. And as a result, I ended up, long story short, I was not treated any different, same as any of the other criminals. They didn't make any distinction between civil and criminal in terms of my case at all. But I ended up getting a lot of the prisoners off drugs, stopping suicides. I was reducing violence between the wings. I shifted the intake system. In fact, I've got actually one of the booklets here, which I designed, the new prisoner welcome booklet that's being used in prisons all over the world right now. I won a national award for the work that I was doing and the difference it was making. But every 2 weeks, I wrote to my private and senior coaching clients. These are people paying me up to 50 grand a year to learn the high level stuff that I do. And when I went in, I said, listen, first, arguing against what's already happened is stupid. All right, if the milk's spilt, sitting there complaining about it, not going to put it back in the bottle or clean the carpet. All right, so free up the energy of resistance, channel it into acceptance, and then you can use that freed energy to go make the next best step. Acceptance is powerful, not from a place of apathy, resignation, or being acquiesced to a dominant authority, but acceptance from, okay, this is the situation, what do we do about it? Rather than sit there with what if only, and all the other BS self-talk that most people have, that internal cancerous voice that takes them down the wrong path. So anyway, every 2 weeks I wrote my private journal, how-to manual, all of my tradecraft on what I was doing with the prisoners in real time as it was unfolding. And every 2 weeks I wrote the letters. And when I came out, my senior students said they'd learned more from the 11 letters and watching how I turned this around in 6 months than following me around the world for the last few years on stage. And I had to publish. I'm like, well, this was never meant to be a book. These are private letters with high-level stuff in. And you guys pay me 50 grand a year to learn this. Right? And this says, yeah, but it would help a lot of people. And that's my hot button. So we published it. It went bestseller in 2 hours, Amazon #1 in 4 hours. It sold to 43 countries on the first day. And if you look at any review on Amazon, Audible, Kindle, for any of the versions we've got them all. It's essentially changed the life of every single person that's read the book. Very humble. And here it is. It's called The Inside Track. And I now give it away. It's $29.95 in Barnes & Noble if you want to walk in. Or I put a site together called getpetesbook.com. And give me a little bit to cover the shipping, and I'll send you a physical copy, and you can dive straight in, or you can get the Audible or the ebook or what have you. And in fact, the Audible, we work with the top sound engineer in Argentina. We composed an original music score, the sound effects. It's an Audible journey with my voice because I wanted the emotion so you could feel the authenticity on it. So yeah, and that was still to this day, I will say, one of the most incredible, awe-inspiring adventures I've ever had the privilege of living. And yes, I lost my business, nearly lost my home, ended up hundreds of thousands in legal debt. And to all intensive purposes from the outside, was like the hardest crash I'd ever had. Wouldn't swap a second of it.
Wow. That's a terrific story, but more so, I love that you went in with that mindset to say, hey, listen, there's a reason why I'm supposed to be here. And I'm not going to look at myself as a victim, but I'm going to come out of this thing as a victor. And who knows? All I know is that joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. And you took that pain, you turned it into joy. And I can see why you've been blessed. This has been a phenomenal episode, just as I knew that it would be, just like I told you in the beginning. For anybody, last thing that I always love to ask is for anybody out there that is inspired by you, but they're thinking, listen, maybe I don't have as much money, I don't have as many resources, maybe I'm just not as strong enough as Pete. What's one thing that you say to that person to just get them to take action?
Nobody has the right to tell you you can't do it. Nobody has the right to tell you you're not good enough. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, we blame other people or circumstances for stuff that our own egos have done to us. Yeah? And when you realize that nowhere in the world is the term or the concept of victimhood rewarded, not from a place of fulfillment, not from a place of empowerment, not from a place of turning anything around. And most people, if you understood that most of the things you complain about you can use as a superpower to inspire other people with. When you take the focus off yourself and your story and you start putting it onto how can I give rather than what can I get, the universe will line up and present you options, and doors will open that you never saw coming. And the universe has got your back. You live in a friendly one, it's a much better deal than thinking you live in a hostile one. And make a choice, because the world's a mirror. Outer world follows inner world. And when you decide that that's what you want to see, it'll reflect back. And I've seen too many instances on every kind of circumstance for anyone talking me out of that awareness.
Got it. Love it. For anybody that wants to stay connected with you, Peter, where can they find you at?
petersage.com, my website, pretty simple. I've got a lot of free stuff out there that I help people with that are struggling on financial resources. I've got some good paid stuff if people are at a higher level and want to take it further, a bit more personal, a bit more advanced. But I try to put as much stuff out there. My YouTube channel has a ton of resources on there, just free. Just go, soak up what you can. And yes, I'm here to help inspire and hopefully do my little bit and leave a little thumbprint on some people's lives for the better.
Love it. Well, we're going to drop all of that in the show notes and the links. But thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And just remember, DreamNation, if you don't take note of anything else, remember, in the dream we trust. But just as Pete said, you must take action. No one can tell you that you can't do it, because if you don't, it will only merely be a fantasy. Thanks again, Pete. We look forward to having you again and just dropping so many jewels. And we wish you nothing but more blessings, better health, and better wealth to come.
Likewise. Thank you, Casanova. Keep doing what you're doing. You have an awesome tribe, an awesome nation, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of it.
Thank you.
That's the episode for today. Let me know if you got any value out of this, if you liked anything about it. Reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter, any of the social media networks, and of course, leave me a review, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you're hearing this at. I would love to have a review to show, what you're getting out of this. Is there anything that I could do better? Is there any way that I can add more value to you? So hopefully you all take some action today. That's my show. I love you all. Be great. But remember, we must take action.